Okay, on today's show, we're going to get right to it. We are going to talk about our reactions to the 4-day Democratic National Convention, a very different event this year, of course, an all virtual affair. Democrats did not descend on Milwaukee like we all expected because of the coronavirus pandemic. And because of that, we had a lot of, I think, a very different feel to this year's convention. But before we get into some of the mechanics of whether or not we think that this went well, and maybe what Democrats and Republicans can take from this year's convention moving forward, Dave, of course, the most important event at any of these conventions, it's the nominee's acceptance speech. And let me just put the question to you point blank. Did Joe Biden do a good job last night?
Yeah, he hit his marks. I still don't think he was better than the Obamas. But, tough bar. And he hit his marks. And I do think the fact that, he didn't make any mistakes. He seemed to be genuine. He seemed to be with confidence. So I think he hit the mark for the most momentous speech of his career. And I think the themes were more important than, anything else, than even like his delivery style, which people were praising. Light over darkness, hope over despair, empathy over division. This is the core of Biden. It's the best rationale for him. It was the best rationale for him during the primary, that basically this is a good guy who can go in the general election, carry the torch, and beat Donald Trump, not scare voters, not be risky to voters, but, sort of be that stable old politician who, may not be the greatest president of our lifetimes, but is basically going to, put his hand on the wheel and drive safely. And I think he accomplished that pretty much across the board last night. And, frankly, from top to bottom, it was a good convention given the circumstances, and I think he capped it well.
Adam, let's talk about, if we can, just for a second. I agree that the themes that Biden presented were important, and I think reflective of what we saw over the course of the entire convention, too. And it did seem to me that Democrats, actually, if you take a step back, made a coherent case over 4 days thematically, which is not. Look, well, I'll tip my cap to them. I don't think that that's a given, and I don't think that we've seen that in a lot of recent conventions. However, I think the delivery was important, if nothing else, because as we've talked about on the show, look, the Trump campaign makes an explicit case that Joe Biden is senile, that he is a doddering old man in decline. There aren't any euphemisms here, right? They say that in interviews, on Twitter, and even in their TV ads. It seemed like that was maybe even Democrats were breathing a sigh of relief, because I will just say I hadn't seen Joe Biden hit some of the heights that he did last night, and just in terms of the forcefulness that he delivered the speech.
Right. I think a lot of the sort of strange and just sort of unprecedented nature of a lot of this campaign that sort of led to this virtual convention really ended up working in his favor. To the point you were making, the fact that we haven't really seen much of Joe Biden in public these past few months since the primary, when the coronavirus really just completely put a halt to in-person campaigning. And certainly on the Democratic side, they are still sticking to that. Obviously, the Republicans and Trump are getting out on the trail a little bit more. And the fact that Trump and his Republican allies have kind of set the bar so low for Joe Biden. Whether or not you actually buy into that or not, I do think that, I don't think the average voter was coming into this speech last night expecting, a barn burning address from a Joe Biden. They weren't expecting him to be a Barack Obama or a Michelle Obama. But he certainly, delivered a very kind of stern and serious speech, kind of about, setting the stakes of the gravity of the moment, kind of, hitting a lot of these themes that we saw other speakers make throughout the week. And I actually think the fact that there wasn't an audience present actually helped make a lot of those points more effective. I think that was the case both for Joe Biden's speech and also for Barack Obama and Michelle Obama, some of these speakers who were really trying to, almost like scare voters straight, right? Like, hey, remember what happened in 2016 when we didn't all come out and vote and we all thought, there's no way Donald Trump could be president? Well, guess what? Have you liked the way the last 4 years have gone? We need to take this seriously. We need to get out and vote this guy out of office. And ultimately, that was the theme of this whole week, right? Is Joe Biden is not Donald Trump, right? He is the opposite of Donald Trump in every single way, because that is really what have we heard this entire campaign from Democrats? What do they want most during the primary? They wanted somebody who can beat Donald Trump. What do a lot of Republicans who don't like Trump and don't like the direction that the party has gone, and they just want to beat Trump, right? So that's the way he's been sort of keeping this broad, fragmented coalition together so far these past few months, where you have the John Kasichs of the world on one side making a case for him. You also have Bernie Sanders making an argument. They're all, they're coming at it from different perspectives, but they're all basically making the same case here, is that we can't afford another 4 years of Donald Trump. Put aside whatever policy or ideological differences you have with Joe Biden. We just have to get this guy in office. We'll revisit some of these, other debates later, because the way that a lot of these speakers were putting it this week, the very foundations of democracy are at stake, which is not an argument you're usually hearing from leading figures in any party during a convention that's really supposed to kind of be rallying the troops before the general election.
I mean, Dave, that was almost the message overall for me off these 4 days, was that Joe Biden is a good guy and Donald Trump is a threat to democracy. Is that how you saw it? And are those? I'm a little curious what you make of, the Democrats for years have said that the real way to make inroads against Donald Trump was to argue that he was bad for the middle class, that his policies favored the rich, and that he was making healthcare more expensive. He was taking away pre-existing conditions because he wanted to repeal the Affordable Care Act. What do you think thematically Democrats tried to hone in on?
I don't think they honed in on that. I think if you go back, it was very similar to a case, Hillary Clinton made. I mean, not to curse the Biden campaign, but
I think you just did, Dave. I think you just did.
This was not an issues-based approach. They didn't really go into the Affordable Health Care Act and talk about Trump and Republican attorney generals trying to sue and, kill it, and talk. They talked a little bit about taxes. They didn't go into a very deep discussion about Trump favoring the wealthy.
I think they only mentioned the tax law twice, and it was Bloomberg and then Biden himself last night.
And it was at the end of the speech, which tells you it is not a priority. I mean, the first half of the speech is the most important part, because reporters are writing, they're on deadline. What are they going to take? We're going to take from the top of that speech. That's what's going to make it in newscasts. I mean, that's just how this process works. So whatever you're putting in the second half of the speech is just not as big of a priority. And this is not an issues-based contrast the Biden campaign is going for. It is values-based. I think we saw that, as you guys mentioned, throughout all 4 of the nights. Sure, he had these little round tables with people and videos talking a little bit about policy, about manufacturing policy, bringing back the auto. But there were no concrete plans like, I'm going to lower your taxes. I remember past convention speech historical. Well, you would see some big policy promises, at least a couple. And that's not going to, there was none of that from Biden. That's not what this is going to be remembered for. It's going to be light over darkness, empathy, unity, feel good themes. And I think Democrats want that.